usually invited to deliver some bad news, but in fact, with DA United and DA overall is really cool, but let's try and see the reality of 2026 before I will discuss with our respected panelists the investment opportunities. So let's get the brief on the screen. What do we expect? What we expect in terms of scenarios and in terms of macroeconomic indicators and investments flow. So the baseline, the scenario space, which is set by two key, just flag me. I had so many charts, so I hardly can present it on my own. I can give more figures, so let's do it together. There's some dynamic. So the scenario space. Firstly, the things developing worldwide, whether the world legal system is going to hold, whether it's going to be ruined, and whether the force of rule or rule of force is going to be identified as the key. Most likely in 2026, the legal system is going to stand, and then it comes to the issue what Ukraine can do, whether we can withstand our subjectivity or we partially will lose our subjectivity. And depending on these two stretches, the whole half a year, we try to validate different scenarios. So the basic scenario is inertial one, and it's named like for 2026, we shall have highly likely, a deal which we say a bad deal. The deal that can allow us to take a break, the negative scenario included into the state budget is not going to be implemented, and we will have enough time to prepare to the next wave of war, to enhance our human capital, to run elections, and then the baseline scenario, the strategic one, would be redeployed again. So transition to the new waves of war. And according to these scenarios, how come we can speak about investments and developments? Everything goes about the continuation of the war, but then we should get some positive slides. So the process goes on. We're just drawing this brief from scratch. Don't put too much positive in it. So two cases that I'm going to present in figures. The first case is inertial case based on figures and voted budget. My congratulations or discongratulations, opposite. On the other hand, that's something that we can pretend to based or reflecting Rubio comments that in 10 years we should overrun Russia, means increase Ukrainian GDP at 10 times or reduce Russia's GDP in 10 times. So maybe we can match somewhere in the middle. So we will have 1 trillion and Russia 700 millions. That would be fine. We'll be working on that. So the question is how to make it happen. Three key components which we have to work on, and IT sector cannot be excluded. So first one, productivity of labor. Currently, our productivity of labor is minimal. Overall, it makes some 20,000 US dollars per real worker. That is really low. We have to increase at least at 3 times that indicator in next decade. That depends on automation, changes in business logics, complications of economy, complications meaning that we have to move from raw material based economy. So what to do? What was Ukrainian economy looked like back in 2021? The breadbasket, the cheap labor, and highly qualified, cheap electricity, one of the cheapest in Europe, very nice geographical location, cheap resources, fertile lands. So all this list as of 2025 has been destroyed. We don't have a cheap labor. We have no labor at all. 75% of jobs filled and 25% of jobs vacant. We don't have cheap electricity. Sometimes it's the most expensive in Europe. We are logistics dead end in many areas. Our landlines are mined or lost its fertility because of climate, and logistics for raw materials been complicated. Accordingly, all that leads that all our previous competitive advantages are senseless. We cannot rely on that anymore. So we need a new economy. And what sort of economy do we need? And here comes idea how that new economy to be created. To use something that we already managed to do. Use our adaptivity, speed and flexibility, ability to build a agentic state. I do hope that in 5 years it's going to happen in real life. Ability to modernize business models. So all that we definitely can do in the nearest time. But besides, what else? So this is our scenario, space with a rotten agreement as unwilling but most probable scenario that we have. Clicker to be connected. Or just next slide. So in reality, a good financial and economic state, only 15% of business been dropped from 35% in 2024. Next slide. Those who sit in this dear city has the better indicator. So that's the hint. Next slide. Ukrainian Business Index that demonstrates the mood. Today, we're going to speak with the National Bank about their index that's extremely low. So we most likely they invest rather than attracts investments and create job spaces. So we are at the negative weighting zone. How come? Because we do not trust the state. There is a lack of capital, lack of human resource, lack of demand, payable demand, and what we expect. Give us money, give us people, give us decent tax system. Don't make it worse. Give us rule of law. So Big Four sits the same for last 4 years. Of course, we have different expectations for 2026 coordinated budget. In fact, it's very tentative because parameters could not be met, implemented without significant inflation parameter. So disregard that. And let's see next slide. We have to change radical things that we can change. We definitely can change case with the human capital, with the moral and psychological state, well-being in business. Being united, working together, that affects the moral and psychological and well-being state. And next, I'll stop you because the time is flying. So while the human capital is going to be reduced, the productivity is going to be our next job. That's the modeling for 2013. With that, we have constant delays because we unlearned to think and action in ambitious way, in big steps. But thanks to Rubio, we can talk about that. We can talk that Ukraine has to change the trend. Poland is going to have $1 trillion GDP. Ukraine, for the first time, had reached 200 billions. Maybe next year we have 240, 240 in different scenarios. But why do we fall every time after? Because our key tasks here to change the logic of Ukraine's positioning from what was there up to what should be, to change the logics of investment. We have stored direct investments, internationals had not been increased. And our neighbors made a significant breakthrough. Poland, more than 350 billion of stored investments. Ukraine, in order to have that economical growth, requires internal investments to be transferred from the falling trend to the growing trend to some 25% of the capital investment. And this is the combat area in investments where this money should come from, where we should find 300 million investments of direct foreign investments. And here IT is the driver in many sectors, from human capital up to creative industries. Next slide. We definitely should change the logic of export, and DSCT and DSCT United are extremely helpful here. Check that track for Poland and Turkey, and it's clear why the Ministry of Economy pays such a significant attention to the strategy of Ukrainian export growth, because we do have enormous deficit of a trade balance. We need to increase export radically, and that's at every spot, at every point we have to get a breakthrough. How do we make the breakthrough? We will talk to our respected panelists in a second, and I would like to ask whether we could, let's get to the next slide, and we will invite panelists. So I do hope those who sit in your phones, you are working hard and increase your productivity. So we will have chairs on the stage and we will invite our panelists. We're not going to name anyone. Denis Sichkov, come back. It's your time to raise and shine. We need more chairs. More and more. Next slide. So just to keep show running, I had no clue that that is going to be so. The Ministry of Economy is going to introduce the strategy of employment. There is a strategy to utilize the economic potential of Ukraine. It's rather the issue of implementation. It's clear what to do now. It's the question how to do.